Hi, I'm Alex Martin, and I'm going to tell you why Sylvia Plath is important for the final. Okay, some background info here. Sylvia Plath is known for her use of confessional poetry, and this is type of autobiographical literature where the writer uses emotional context, such as mental illness or relationships, and it's all very personal and private. It's very controversial at the time, and Plath is very well known for it because she was the most controversial. She would use very intense language, and she'd curse, and she'd use things like Nazi imagery to compare other people in her life. Her work connects to her severe depression, which she suffered with her entire life, and has made multiple suicide attempts, eventually succeeding. Her most influential poem is Daddy, because it shows her father's influence on her entire life, especially on her relationships in the future and her depression. Alright, in class we discussed the different ways to read Plath's work, and the two types we came up with that were most useful were the psychological perspective and the confessional perspective. And those, of course, mean emotions and actual autobiographical events, respectively. The class also touched on the theme of devils, and in Plath's case, it was an inner devil, meaning it was her own mental pain and anguish that haunted her and tempted her and worked throughout her life. And the piece I'm reviewing is Daddy, and because it demonstrates Plath's common thread of complicated connection to her father and her battle with mental torment, and it serves as a basis for viewing Plath as a confessional poet. This is her most direct piece. Okay, so let's get right into it. Daddy comes across as a letter, and we talked about this in class. It describes the lasting effects of her father's influence, such as his control and his harshness. She states, "For 30 years poor and white, barely daring to breathe or I chew." It shows how long she suffered with her father's influence and what kind of effect it had on her mind, such as her being afraid of him. She also references her husband and blames her father for her relationship with him, Ted Hughes. She says, "I was 10 when they buried you. At 20 I tried to die and get back to you. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look." This again reaches back to that Nazi imagery of her father and shows that she kept repeating the relationship as she went on throughout her life. It's very graphic and shocks the reader, as a lot of Plath's work does, and again shows the damage dealt to Plath with her relationship. Plath's daddy is also filled with a lot of Nazi imagery. Um, she compares herself to a Jew during the Nazi regime, and Plath compares her father to a Nazi. She compares him by saying he was a Panzerman, often calls him a bastard, and it shows her real anger at her father and her own personal connection to her life through this poem. She writes, "Not God, but a swastika, so black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you." And so this shows that her father's influence and his control actually led to her relationship with Ed Hughes, with the Nazi imagery and the idea that every woman loves a fascist and a brute, someone who controls her. This is important because Plath is the purest example of confessional poetry. She addresses personal topics very blatantly. She does not hide that it's her own personal life. She uses it to work through her problems, as many confessional poets do. Specifically, Daddy is important because it uses all of Plath's main elements in her writing, like her dark themes and her language, such as saying bastard to her father, and the Nazi imagery being very intense, her personal connection through her relationships, and her own emotional torture and long-lasting effects of those tortures. And so this will help with the final because understanding confessional poetry comes from being able to understand how it connects to the author or the speaker. And so Plath, being a very direct example of that, will clarify many things for the final. And thank you for listening.